You ever get into a big time leadership job, ask a lot of questions before you try to do or change anything. I didn't go in there guns blazing because they would have eaten me alive.
Right. And so do it my way. My way's better.
Right.
Yeah.
So, hey, I've got experience here, and this is what we're going to do. And oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing it. None of that.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Excellence Podcast. Today's guest rose through the ranks to lead one of the largest brokerages in Northeast Florida before starting his own company, Momentors. Momentors is a coaching, mentoring, and consulting company to help individuals rise to new levels in their career while achieving a better quality of life, better relationships, and financial success. He has been part of the John Maxwell Leadership Certified team, which I admire as a John Maxwell fan. Let's welcome this dynamic individual with nearly 2 decades of real estate and coaching success, the founder and CEO of Momentors, Kevin Waugaman, to the show.
Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate you having me.
I did pronounce your last name correctly.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Appreciate that. That's always a challenge. And I always, when I'm taking my notes and preparing pre-show, I'm like, I better ask him how to pronounce his last name, and I always forget.
No, you got it. You got it, man. Proud of you.
But yeah, appreciate you coming down. I know you got an event on July 19th. It's going to be over at Landmark. But as I mentioned pre-show, I think there's a lot of agents out there, hopefully a lot of the listeners out there that know a lot of the top agents that I've had on have had a Momentor or Momentor.
That's perfect.
A mentor or a coach at some time or another. And what role, obviously, you play in coming into services, because having spent, what is probably 15, 16 years at least, right before you opened your company in real estate, hands-on every day, and what you bring. Looking forward to that. So I want to kick off the show, though, as my sponsor here. I mentioned that before I forget, because I always do. These nice mugs from Remy Graphics, these laser engraved mugs. This is not the only thing Remy Graphics does. She does a lot of other laser engraving stuff, and you can get one off. So if you're doing a closing and you want to put John and Sally, welcome to Jacksonville, St. Augustine, whatever, she'll do 1 or 2 mugs for you if that's all you need, let alone the other products that she offers at Remy Graphics. Kevin, where are you from?
Born and raised in Stuart, Florida. Actually, frankly, all up and down the east coast of Florida. My dad was a developer, so we moved around a lot. So I've called everywhere from Isla Mirada to Jacksonville home, and absolutely love it here. So lived in Stuart for a while until high school years, moved up to Jacksonville for 4 years for high school, went to Episcopal High School, Jacksonville, then North Carolina for college, and then back to Jacksonville to start my professional career at Merrill Lynch.
So you went to Elon, right? Yep. What was, at that time, 18, 19, 20 years old, what did you visualize yourself as a career?
Financial advisor. I was a big fan of, talk about full circle, Warren Buffett. One of the first books I ever read was called The Making of an American Capitalist, about Warren Buffett. Went to Elon, and that was going to be, my focus was finance, business administration with a concentration in finance, and I was going to go and be a financial advisor. So got hired at Merrill Lynch right out of college, went to work for their credit division. This was Merrill Lynch Credit Corporation.
Right.
Back in the 90s, client services was the job. It was basically taking applications for mortgages. And that was over in the town center, town center area, which used to be it was Florida Blue, Merrill Lynch, and Cow Pastures, which is now the St. John's Town Center. Yeah. And so that's where I started, and then moved into asset management. Ended up going to work in Miami for project management and business analysis, and decided for a variety of reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into, that financial services wasn't for me, and ended up getting into real estate.
What is it that you didn't like about it?
Well, the real thing was, when I was working in Miami, I had an incredible mentor and a fantastic individual. What I did not see at that point, though, was what my future would look like. There was a shift in me at some point that it wasn't going to be sales for me, it was going to be leadership. And at the same time, my dad, my parents were divorced when I was 10, my dad was moving back to the Stuart area, and I was living in Miami at the time, and I thought, why don't I do something with Dad? And so he and I talked, we looked at everything. We looked at Land Rover dealerships, Subway franchises, cash plus stores, where you get the payday loan. We looked all these different opportunities. Well, like I mentioned, had been a developer. And so real estate was kind of already in my blood. It was in my DNA. And I started getting interested. And at the time, real estate was going gangbusters. We're talking 2004 right now. So we started talking about this. And it's like, why don't you go work for a company for a couple years, get your broker's license, and we'll put together our own deal, and we'll go into business together. And that all sounded amazing in 2004.
Right.
And so I started going down this path. I left a good job, went to Premier Realty Group.
Are you married at this time?
Not yet.
Okay, that makes it a little easier.
Praise God. I go to work for Premier Realty Group. I interviewed 3 companies. 2 of them gave me their policy manual and offered me a desk. I ruled them out immediately. Premier Realty Group, I interviewed with a legend, Ron Noyes, who spent a lot of years in the Prudential Network, and Steve Bonner, who was one of the most brilliant real estate minds I've ever known. It was a small company in Stuart, Florida.
Yeah.
But they really cared, and obviously they had the wherewithal to vet the people that were going to come work for their company. So,
how did that impress you? Because one of the things, if you may not have listened to my episodes before, but with the agents themselves, how important it is to really vet the broker they team up with.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question. It's important. It's not a decision that you want to make multiple times and make a bunch of moves in your career, in my opinion. And so when I went from, hey, we like you immediately, to here's the desk, to someone who was basically a series of 3 meetings. And it was me, and they were more impressed with the questions that I was asking, in addition to the answers of the questions that they were asking me, because they wanted someone that really cared about what they were doing, and they wanted somebody that was going to reflect the brand appropriately and not just be out there wild.
Did you know they were a very selective group when you went in? Because I know there's brokers in town listening to different agents. There are some brokers who are very selective. Others are just give me a warm body.
Yep.
And so they are actually interviewing and listening to what you're saying to decide whether or not they want to bring you into the mix.
Yeah, so I look, there are different models out there, there are different flavors for everybody. I totally get that. And for me, brand new brand made a huge, it was a huge deal for me, and it was one of the biggest. So you asked me if I knew they were selective going in. Well, the way they handled themselves is part of what told me. And I also talked to other people. I mean, I did my homework. Back then I looked at the advertising that they were doing. I looked at the website. I talked to people in the industry, and I started getting a sense for the different types of business models. You have a wide range of them. You have the full service model that's going to do a whole lot for you, and the splits are going to be different than the model that's not going to do as much for you, but the splits are going to be higher, and everything in between. And right from the get-go, I realized how important, what really is important, is it a fit for you? Is it a culture fit? Does it align with your values? Does a company philosophy align with what you're trying to accomplish, and treat people the way you want to be treated? And that, to me, was super important, not only for me early on in my career, but then as I became the leader of that company, and then in future leadership roles. Well,
I mean, you've got a couple decades working in and around real estate agents. The importance of that connection. Like I said, we do have some people that bounce around, and I remember what Caitlin Doherty said with DJ and Lindsay. She's like, yeah, I think agents, they're looking for that connection instead of doing some of the homework out before they go and sign up. Sure. They're just jumping brokerages every year, or some of them even sooner than that, and hoping to find something that just clicks for them.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's that, and I think sometimes it's, this is hard work, and sometimes we're looking for an external solution to something that's an internal job that needs to happen. And, you can, if you're determined, a lot of good companies out there, you're going to make it work. But there's a lot of inside work. The concept that it's not working for me here, I better go somewhere else. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's I'm not connecting with my broker, or the philosophy doesn't line up. But maybe it's, man, there's something I need to fix, or I need to do, or I need to develop some better habits in order to make this thing work. I try to tell people, look, before you make a move, you go all in wherever you are, because sometimes you see people make a move, they haven't gone all in before they're out the door. Right.
We'll dig a little deeper in that when we start digging into Momentors. All right, so in 2005-ish, you joined Premier.
Yes.
That's
right.
based on your LinkedIn. That's what
right.
you had there. Obviously, within, really 12 months, we're starting to feel it. I know my parents were selling a house in Naples and it was early, probably May of 2006, and the market had already started to turn down at that time. So tell us a little bit about being a real estate agent, a new real estate agent during this time period.
Yeah, I'll never forget it. It was a good job I left at Merrill Lynch. My very first sales meeting, and this was 2005, my very first sales meeting, I sit down and I mentioned Steve Bonner, he was the owner of the company and brightest mind, brightest real estate mind, probably to this day that I've ever encountered. And my very first sales meeting, there's 20 people in the room. He stands up in front of everybody and he goes, I want everyone to know one thing out of this sales meeting, one thing only, and that is the party is almost over. And I'm looking at the guy like, what are you talking about? I mean, you look at CNBC, Wall Street Journal, if you want to make millions, you go into real estate. And he's the only person I've heard say this. I'm like,
right.
Who is this guy?
Right.
It's like, well, I'm going to, But he was looking at the leading indicators. He was looking at consumer confidence. He was looking at, sales versus end users. He was looking at interest. He was looking at everything that was painting this picture in his mind. He was an economist, by trade. And it was painting this picture that was coming down the road. So I didn't buy in. It was probably a good thing that I didn't buy in because that kind of helped me, maybe be a little bit naive to what was coming. And so I started working and here's, to try to give a little bit of value. This might be me speaking to the newer agents out there right now. There are some mistakes you can make when you're early in real estate that don't feel like they're mistakes. You can spend a lot of time working and make $0. And one of the things that I started doing was I started working on the periphery and things that were really comfortable, postcards, sending emails. I really enjoyed going to classes, learning everything, which I'm a coach now. Obviously, I believe in education and personal development, but you can overdo it. The real learning tests are out there in the field. And so I got really comfortable and into a comfort zone and really struggled for a couple years. And until my water got shut off, and then it was kind of an aha moment for me, right? And this I'm not telling this story because I'm proud of it, that I had to hit the bottom of the barrel before I got my head out of my what. But the water got shut off. I'll never forget. I was actually taking a shower, and the water got shut off. I gathered a bunch of change, went to Publix, filled up some water jugs, came back, finished taking a shower, and just thought, and thankfully not married at the time, no kids. Man, I'm never going to put myself in this position again. I'm not going to. This is nuts. And so from that day forward, I got to the office, had my meeting, made the decision, and started prospecting expireds. And now I'm doing the face-to-face, voice-to-voice, getting out of my comfort zone, doing the stuff that really matters, that really makes a difference. And I went from dead last in my company in sales to second. I won't lie and say first. I was second to their top producer over a 12-month period, and that was a big deal over such a short period of time. It was only my third full year in real estate. But it was like, man, you to the newer age. I mean, you just gotta get out there. You gotta get uncomfortable.
Gotta get dirty.
You gotta get dirty, and I think it seems so obvious, but man, you can really keep yourself busy in any sales business really, and not be where the rubber meets the road. So it was very brutal. To answer your question, it was brutal over a period of time.
Now you're put to the wall. Water shut off. You decided to call on the expireds.
Yep.
Did you sit there and dwell on some sort of script, or you just?
Great question.
Yeah,
that's a great question. For me, I realized that scripts weren't the thing. I started putting together a more of a call structure that I basically said, I'm going to have an opening, I'm going to have some questions I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to close for the appointment. And then I had different things that I might say in each one of those sections predicated on how the conversation goes. So I'm not sounding like a robot and irritating people. Right. And so we started having some success there. The other thing that I did during this time is, I started making the calls and I started knocking on doors. If something expired, I knew that other people were calling, but not many people were going to knock on doors. So I was showing up, knocking on doors. Another thing that was powerful for me was I partnered with a more experienced agent. So situational partnering can be a very powerful thing because I didn't have the name recognition. So what I did, I went to, his name's Leon Aboud, who's a great mentor of mine. He and I stay in touch. Great man. And we started doing this together. Well, I started doing all the prospecting, but he let me use his name. My name's Kevin. I work with Leon. Here's what we're going to do, and we're going to come in. We're going to, get your house sold. We are experts in taking expired properties and breathing life into them, and then getting them sold. And so we started having some success there, and it started working, and that started snowballing. And next thing I knew, I had multiple transactions, and we got the thing going. And then at that point, I'll go back to some of the other details, but at that point, the owner of the company, who knew I also had leadership experience from a job at Merrill Lynch, needed to get rid of his sales manager, so asked me to step into that role. So I moved.
That was my next question, because you kind of roll in leadership pretty early.
I was 4 years basically in direct sales, and then I moved into leadership. But that expired. So the expired thing was super difficult, but that is the most, for anybody out there listening that needs to get a listing, that is the most immediate source of listing business, because you have someone that's already decided to sell and already decided that they're willing to pay a commission. And so if you want to get listings, and there are fewer now at this time in the marketplace, this was back in 2007, 2008, there were lots of them. Buyers were, the month supply of inventory went from 2 months to 30 months. So a lot of properties were coming off the market. We're starting to see some of that again today. What
were some of the conversations you were having? Because I imagine, just knowing what would happen, I started mortgages in 2005, so I know it was somewhat going on. But you were out on the street. I'm sitting in a call center at Quicken Loans, so it was a little different. Although the phones were much quieter than they were, and say right up in the 2006 and summer 7, it was very slow. But was it a lot of them understanding that I needed to drop the price? What was a lot of the hangups of why they couldn't move the property?
Well,
where you came in, and obviously
the buyer pool had shrunk dramatically. A lot of people had gotten themselves multiple units, and there was no end user. There were not enough people to rent them out. There were not enough people to buy the flips that they were doing. What we needed to do was it's hard to just tell someone that price is the issue. So and that's not always the issue. It's either it's condition, marketing, and price. Those are the three main functions in terms of how you're getting your property sold. So we would go evaluate all three. And in 2008, frankly, a lot of it was pricing, and we saw major price reductions needed to happen in order to get properties sold. And then we started working through this short sales and foreclosures and trying to figure out that monster. I was doing short sales before they had all the loss mitigators and all the farms that were doing them for you. We were figuring out how to do them as realtors, and that was a crazy time as well. But yeah, those were the conversations. It was eyeball to eyeball with someone, telling them information that they didn't necessarily want to hear. One thing,
so you replaced a sales manager, who my first assumption would be was not adapting to the times, because the times were changing in real estate, and how you work in real estate. Whether the short sales, which 2008 and 2009 were like pulling teeth, they got better as the institutions got a little more proficient at what they were doing to move these houses, move these short sales, and so forth. But in looking and going back to the subject of talking about the agents bouncing from broker to broker, in this case, you had a sales manager that obviously this owner thought was probably getting stale. Is that it?
So he had strengths, and at the same time, he never had experience selling real estate.
Oh.
And so I think that was more of his issue, is getting buy-in and trying to coach agents when he hadn't walked in their shoes. And so I think because I had the leadership experience, and now the owner saw me getting some traction in sales, understanding that I now know how to sit down and list a house, price reductions, work with buyers. I've developed a buyer consultation system before a lot of agents even did that. Because I came from financial services, and you had a big presentation for anybody you were sitting down and talking to. So I had a little bit more of I kind of brought a little bit of corporate into it. So I had systems that I started putting together, and I think he looked at that and he said, I think I can use this in helping coach and train some of the agents that we're bringing on board right now. And I had some credibility with the more experienced agents as well, because they saw me.
You reached that number 2 spot. Yeah. And you earned it. You worked through it. It wasn't something that just was easy. You didn't hit it on a 2020 and put a stick in the yard and someone was going to buy it.
And that's why. And so, if I can just say this real quick, I tell the story not to try to impress anyone, but so that people understand that the market does matter. I'm not going to sit here and say that the hot market doesn't matter or cold market doesn't matter. It matters. But I know a lot of people, myself included, that had their best years in the worst of markets. And so there's opportunity in all markets, and that's really what the message is there's some challenging times always coming up at some point. And that doesn't mean we need to get out of the business. That doesn't mean we need to jump ship. It just means we need to maybe reevaluate what we're doing and make adjustments.
I think I want to say it was Matthew Rathbun. I don't know if you know, Matthew was down here for the RE Bar Camp, and he speaks nationally at a lot of real estate conferences. He's a real estate agent in Southern, I think it was Richmond, Virginia. But his point with all these things that all the agents are being told to do right now, obviously you got artificial intelligence coming out, video. And he's like, if you don't have, I just want your opinion on this statement of what if you believe it or not, because talking about the actual broker or leader in your office. He said, if your broker isn't out there doing it himself, it's very hard for them to really, bring it to their team. As it sounds like this particular person probably, as the market changed, he was really a fish out of water and figuring out how to get through these things. What is your, just your vision on what a broker, being out in front of their people is so important.
Yeah. Well, I think being out in front of the people is important. I think it works both ways. I think you can be, because when I became a broker down there, I became a non-competing broker. I gave up my book of business and now I'm not doing it. But as a broker, even if you're non-competing, you can be on the front lines a lot with your people.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go on listing appointments. You can sit down at the negotiation table. I've done this even as recently as being up here in the chair I was in at Berkshire Hathaway. You can definitely get front lines, and if you're committed to the craft and you're learning the forms and you're with your people, asking them questions as much as you're trying to coach. I mean, big part of coaching is asking questions and learning alongside of someone, because when they're teaching you at the same time, they're learning, you're learning, we're all learning.
Right.
So I think you could do it both ways. I mean, for me, the competing broker model is just a challenge because generally speaking, in my experience, something ends up by suffering, and some aren't able to do it. Some, it's just, I'm going to go do my real estate practice, and therefore this part, the management part, is going to suffer, or I'm going to do this part so well that this part's going to suffer. So that was always my thought process. But some people are able to crush it doing that.
No, I think there are some brokers in town who aren't producing, but they are actively out there. Like you said, they're engaging with the agents, they're finding out what's going on, and then sharing obviously with the others. Because you can only be working with so many transactions at any one time. To me, I always, when I'm talking to people talking about being in mortgages, having been in a call center the first 12 years of my life, I've written more loans than any of these guys out on the streets have, because we're volume. And writing at times 35, 40 deals in a month during some of these hot refinance times, you're looking at credit report. You know how many credit reports you need to pull and see? Does this smell? Is this going to get through?
Sure.
You learn those things by at-bats. And the only way, to me, a broker in a real estate office can stay out in front is either they're doing it themselves or they're so engaged with their people, learning about what they're dealing. As you know, every real estate transaction has always got a couple curveballs in it, and you got to navigate through and get these deals done, and you've got to absorb all that stuff in so you could take this and hand it over here to these people.
No question.
Yeah.
Boots on the ground matters. I mean, you're out there, you're going on the caravans, you're doing the sales meetings, you're talking to your people, you're doing hopefully quarterly or twice a year reviews with them, checking in with them. What are your challenges? What are you facing right now? Yeah, you're engaged. No question.
Since we're on this part of this questions out there, you're coaching agents. You're deeply involved in the industry. These brokers need to be out in front on this whole NAR settlement thing, because we all have our opinion on it, but we've got to keep the troops in line, so to speak, keep the positive energy going, and not look for the positive outcome, if you want to call it that. What is your, I know you're interacting with agents. What are some of the things that you're hopefully spinning them in the right direction? Yeah.
Well, we're going to spend a lot of time on July 19th at Landmark Title talking about this. I think you have two things right now that are your quote unquote potential disruptors, which is an overused term, but you have the settlement, and then you have how people are engaging with artificial intelligence. And my thoughts on both of those are they are potentially existential only for certain people. And for the people that are going to adapt and make the moves and do the right things, there's going to be so much tremendous opportunity in how we utilize those, not only the AI tool, but how you approach working with buyers, and how this is probably going to run some people out of the market just because people fear change. So I don't think that, would I have written it this way? No, I don't think it's necessarily the greatest thing, but I do know that it's going to be there to deal with. I mean, think about this. I wasn't in the business at the time, but at one point agents went from MLS books to then all the information being online. Okay, that got some people out of the business, but it also eventually became awesome. I mean, we've dealt with Zillow, we've dealt with other.
Zillow was going to take over.
Zillow's going to take over, and now the internet's ubiquitous and everyone has access to it. So what's really happened is real estate agents, professionals have become, instead of the protectors of the information, they've become the interpreters of the information, and that's still going to be there. That's still going to be there, even with AI. You got to figure out how you're going to incorporate AI. Now, I write all my own content personally. When I put content out there, I don't use it. I use it for some research, and I think agents can use it for research. I think we just got to be aware of it, and how can we use it now to our advantage? And then with the suit, I think you just got to be ready. I mean, there's some things that you can do. First of all, I mean, this is overstated, but it's in case someone hasn't heard this, understanding and recognizing your value proposition is huge. And it's not just about, hey, I'm going to help you find a house, and hey, I'm going to I'm going to really care about you and all that stuff. The buyers need certain things from their real estate agent, and it has to do with confidence, it has to do with empathy and listening skills, it has to do with guidance and strength and courage and all these things that we need to bring to the table, because what do they want from us? They really want to, when you strip it all away, I want my financial situation to improve. I want my housing situation to improve. I want it to happen with lower stress and lower liability. I mean, these are the things at the end of the day that they need from us. Right. And for the agents that are going to be able to articulate that, they're going to be super successful. Yeah. Now, I'll also say getting good at taking listings is a good idea right now. You'll still be
in control.
You'll still be able to work with buyers, but if the agents I'm coaching, if you tell me that I prefer working with buyers, that's fine. But you also want to improve your listing book as well.
Well, I was chatting with Miss Dunya Taylor, who owns Remy Realty as well as Remy Graphics this morning, as she dropped off these new mugs this morning, that the listing agents need to be good. You can go out there and get lists, but what's going to change the market is when you send a bunch of listing agents, which I think will be weeded out, who just immediately just go to, I'm worried about me, instead of doing what they've been doing all along and saying, no, we need to get 5 or 6% because we need the incentive for the buyer's agent and do business as normal. Would you agree with that? And the strong listing agents need to, you want to be strong at the listing presentation, but that's part of being strong in there is explaining to them why they need to have the buyer's incentive in there. And then to me, it would take a lot of stress off everyone.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think you have to know your buyer proposition. You have to know your seller proposition, and be able to articulate the value of not only what I bring to the table, but the value of being able to
why we need to do this,
and expand the buyer pool when you do that. And again, you take a lot of the stress off the system. So I agree with that 100%. And I think there are going to be some agents. There will be a lot of agents that are really, really good at doing that, and will continue to flourish and have more opportunities to do so.
All right. So you make a transition. You come up to Jacksonville. Am I correct?
That's right.
And join Berkshire Hathaway.
Yep.
And Ponte Vedra. Tell us a little bit about where you started with them, which if I recall was in Ponte Vedra, but I'll let you take the story.
Sure. It was actually serendipitous. When I took the leadership job in South Florida, a great decision. I've always kind of gravitated towards helping other people be successful, probably even before I ought to have. In some situations, I'd rather teach it than do it. But so I committed to 5 years there, and because I knew at some point I'd probably be back in Jacksonville. I love it here. Floated a resume, and it ended up in hands of a good friend of the family, and then it went to Davidson Realty, who gave it to Christy Budnick at Berkshire Hathaway. And Christy called me. They happened to be looking for a broker in their Ponte Vedra office. That's where I lived when I was in the Jacksonville area in high school. Always kind of visualize myself working in real estate and being in Ponte Vedra. So when that call came, we both look at it as kind of a serendipitous moment. I remember I was so loyal to the company down there. I wouldn't even take the phone call, our initial phone call on property. I left and drove across the bridge and sat in the parking lot of the Hutchinson Island Marriott to have my first conversation with Christy, and felt just kind of weird about doing it. But it all worked out. And over a series of, again, 3 or 4 interviews with her and with Linda Shearer, the founder of the company, we decided that it was a fit. And then I started working in the Ponte Vedra office. And man, what a powerhouse office that is. I mean, filled with incredible people, not just great producers, but just incredible people. I mean, and it was, I almost thought when I tell people this, I thought I got like a honeymoon reception, like, oh, okay, we'll see how long this is going to last. You know, everyone's playing nicely together. It's a family environment. It's all good. And 6 months later, I was like, okay, this is not honeymoon. These are people that really care about each other. They care about the community. They care about the company, and just had an absolute blast there. Ran that office for 4 years. Got into some really good situations, some really good negotiations. Learned a lot from that group of people as well.
Most people say, oh, that's just a dream job for a sales manager. But really, if you're taking on an all-star team, you know, if we want to call it that, you're going in there, obviously you don't want to lose any of those all-stars.
Sure.
And you got, you know, people who are doing far more production than you ever have, you know, so they have high credibility. You know, what's your credibility coming in? You know, there's a lot of things that go through your mind. Someone from the outside would say, oh yeah, I'd love to manage that office. Yeah, for how long? Yeah. Because to stay out in front of the top people, to me, people change brokerages because the broker is no longer adding value to them.
Sure.
So imagine these are things going through your mind as you're driving up 95 to come up here. What are some of the things that you learned there and managing that high producing office?
You know, there was a little bit of an intimidation factor there, but I was pretty confident in my abilities of doing it. And so I'll tell you the single best piece of advice that helped me in that job was given to me by one of my friends that moved from sales to management at Merrill Lynch in the Palm Beach area. And he said, Kevin, if you ever get into a big time leadership job, ask a lot of questions before you try to do or change anything. And that stuck with me. So I didn't go in there guns blazing because they would have eaten me alive.
Right.
And
gonna do it my way. My way's better.
Right.
Yeah.
So, hey, I've got experience here, and this is what we're going to do. And oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing it. None of that.
This is how I did it down in Stewart.
No, those words may have come out of my mouth a couple of times, but that was just in spite of myself. I couldn't help it. But my first series of sales meetings. First I met with everybody, asked some questions. You know, tell me what you're trying to accomplish. What are your goals? How long you've been in real estate? Took a lot of the top producers out to lunch, and then my sales meetings were more, instead of me trying to give information, it was, okay, tell me a little bit about why sellers work with you. Tell me all the things that we do here that are, and so my first 4 or 5 sales meetings, tell me why you guys work here. What are some of the competitive advantages of being in this place versus other places? And by the end of it, before I even tried to say anything, that some of the top producers that were considered really tough on managers were some of my, closest relationships now, and they were very supportive in helping me gain that.
You felt they were part of the program,
and they were, and it was true. And I learned a lot of stuff about the market and the market share, and it just and great mentorship from Christy and Linda along the way, and so I had, and there was also, and Cheryl, it was amazing because Cheryl Dolan, who's still in the Ponte Vedra office, was a realtor in Stewart while I was leading down there, so knew my reputation. And when Christy announced, before I even came up here to the office, that they were hiring me, Cheryl stood up and said, "Oh my gosh, you can't believe," and that helped a lot too. She talked a little bit about how credible I was from what I was doing.
Yeah, some third party
So the third party that was not planned at all.
Right.
Christy swears it helped too. But I think that's the biggest thing is listen before you speak.
Yeah. No, that's great advice for any manager coming in. You've spent a lot of time studying John Maxwell.
Yep.
When did you start following him?
Yeah, so I glossed over it a little bit. When I moved to Miami with Merrill Lynch, I worked for a guy named David McWilliams who passed away a couple of years ago. But just he was the one that I kind of looked at and said, I want to be a leader one day, because he led the region of Florida for Merrill Lynch, and he just family man, just had it all together, confident, had the right priorities, just really had it. And at a time in my life when I did not. I mean, I was all over the place. I didn't know which way I was up, party too much, not getting enough sleep, just health was terrible. And he put a John Maxwell book in my hand. It was Today Matters. And to this day, one of my favorite books. When I know someone graduating college or whatever, I put a Today Matters book in their hand. And by the way, not saying that changed everything for me on a dime. It did not. It was it was a gradual process. But started reading John Maxwell, and then of course all the other. I mean, I've got my leadership library, my books at home. I'm always reading something. Right now, it's a deep work by Cal Newport. I don't know if you've looked into any of his stuff, but John Maxwell has been a tremendous influence in my life. And funny enough, when COVID happened, one of our annual meetings that we normally do in person, make a big deal out of, we had to pivot, again, a COVID word, but we were able to bring John Maxwell in, and he did a virtual event for us for Florida Network Realty, and that was just a huge deal for me to be able to have him speak at a company after having been influenced by him for so many years.
How important, I've read more books obviously since I've been out of school than I ever did. I found ways to get through my education, get my degree without having to really read a whole bunch. But as an adult, we absorb it different ways. As an adult, obviously, I got hooked on John Maxwell, just like the way, I don't know, the way that he writes, way he thinks, we just match, and you want to turn the next page, type of reading. But whether it's listening in your car, or, I do like reading the hardcover book. I hate paperback. I want a hardcover. How important as an agent in their growth and it doesn't have to be John Maxwell. There's so many other great writers out there. Personal development is where I'm leading is to be working on that all the time. You don't have to be full-fledged. I think a lot of, read 10 pages a day or 10 minutes or whatever. A lot of them just recommend. And there's a lot of personal development books that are actually set up that way. You can read a chapter in 10, 15 minutes, and that's the way they're designed. So you're reading that one chapter a day, or the audio books. I'm getting a chapter in from my 20-minute ride into work. And they're designed that way specifically, so you're getting that one chapter a day. But they need to just constantly be working that and just for their growth, so they can stand up in front of people. I think my conversational pieces are better because I'm reading, and I'm able to listen to what this guy's writing, and then obviously bringing it in here, and you say something, it triggers a thought that I read, and then now we have a conversation, just like they're standing in front of their customers and having a conversation. Sometimes it's not even about the house.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How important is that to build into your routine?
I mean, I feel like it's so important that I even wrote a book about it. That's almost complete. It's called One to Grow On, and developed a community around it where people can come in and engage with content over a period of time, as you say, in short bites, and kind of progress through it without question. And this is something I learned from John Maxwell many years ago. Is everyone kind of has a plan for their business, a plan for what they want to do, the goals list, but not a lot of people have a personal development plan. And whether it's related to your craft or just what is it about your mindset? What is it about your personal growth? What is it about your spirituality, your body and health, your education? What are you doing to constantly evolve and again get outside of your comfort zone? Because you put all of your I've only met a few people that put every ounce of themselves into real estate, and they function well. A very small group of people. You kind of need to have a little bit more of a harmony around you, and I think personal development is a great way to accomplish that. And you also look at some of the studies in terms of neuroscience and aging and age-related dementia and that type of thing, and how important it is to keep that brain functioning and healthy and trying new things and experiencing new things. No question in my mind. And whether it's hardback books, I mean, there's some great, in addition to yours, and I do listen to it, by the way, but there's some great podcasts out there with, I won't rattle them off, but there's other podcasts out there that Lewis Howes is one of them. That have you listened to Lewis Howes' School of Greatness?
No.
That's a great one, and he brings tons of guests in, and they talk about all kinds of different topics.
Yeah.
But here's one thing that I've done in mine is, the one thing about some of those podcasts is they jump from topic to topic, and I tend to like to go deeper. And so the way I structured my community is that we go deep into a topic, and then you spend a month there, and then you move on to the next one, as opposed to, one day we're going to talk about, mindset, and the next day we're going to talk about, spirituality, and then you kind of bounce around. So
you're just kind of hitting the highlights and not really digging in deep or making it a routine, whatever, mindset. Yeah. Okay. What does that mean?
That's right.
And of course it means something different to everyone, right? I mean, it's, and then what everyone's personal challenges are to create that mindset and why they have that mindset. And one person can change their mindset pretty quickly. Another person needs a little more hammering.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
They're not as malleable, right? Is that?
That's right. Good one.
All right. So you created Momentors it's been about almost a year and a half.
Yep.
Now. You've taken your experience as an agent in obviously leadership. You're deep in the John Maxwell, which John Maxwell isn't just talking to managers. He's talking to everyone. Mm-hmm. To me, when he's talking, and I think people, he's seen as an expert in leadership. But I don't know what I can't think of the correct term. Maybe you can just how he writes his books. I just find them just so fascinating, because I guess I always say I should have been a psychology major, right? Why do people do what they do? And,
yep.
and sometimes he can give you a different angle when you're reading him, going, yeah, that's right. And when I have conversations with people, sometimes I can be, hey, I don't know how to say this, but this is what I'm trying to get. And you have to understand, I think he's a perfect example. We all put our pants on the same way. And,
yep.
These people, just because they're a manager doesn't mean, they've got far more experience than you, whatever. They've gotten there for different reasons and whatever. And creating that relationship with those around you, helping your leaders out. And of course, as being a leader, I think one of the greatest things is, leaders create other leaders. Right. That's really the telltale sign of a great leader, is who creates other leaders.
Sure.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And really the reason I think it's applicable to everybody, and he'll tell you this right in his books, is self-leadership is the most difficult thing. We're all leaders because mm-hmm. we all need to lead ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of us may be leaders in our community, some of us in our family, some of us in organizations, but some of us, aren't in the top seat in the organization, but you still can exhibit leadership qualities and help lift others up around you. And so that's why, in my mind, I agree 100% with you. It's not just for leaders. That might be his expertise and his kind of his tag, right. But it's applicable to everybody.
I like influence and credibility. To me, that's one of the biggest things that I've gotten from him, is influence and credibility. And influence, you're not influencing people to hopefully not do bad things. Right. You're influencing, how you come in the office. Obviously this person that gave you an endorsement when you first came up to Ponte Vedra, and gave you credibility. There, she obviously had some credibility, and so she endorses you. You automatically have credibility. Now we'll see what happens next week after you got here, but she gave you that dose, so you walked in the door. A little bit about that. Right. I want to break down, because going on your website, you kind of break it down into 3 categories: life coach, sales training, and leadership development. Let's just jump into life coach. Tell us a little about Momentors and what you do in these 3 areas.
Sure. Momentors, the life coaching part, is really designed to help the person that I was 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And by no means am I going to sit here and claim to be perfect and have it all figured out, because I'm a lifelong learner, and that's something I do in perpetuity. Mm-hmm. But I've overcome some stuff, and a lot of it's self-inflicted. And if someone out there is dealing with maybe some sort of issue with identifying purpose in life, or struggling with trying to figure out, why do I go to work in this job, or maybe the big one is partying too much. I mean, I smoked a pack of cigarettes a day, all kinds of things like that mm-hmm. I see people struggle with. And just trying to figure out a path, and a lot of it is just not having an understanding as to why I keep making the decisions I make. And I messed around for probably more than most. I mean, it took me into my 30s to start trying to figure out, okay, this isn't the direction I want to be going, and I need to start making some changes. And so for me, it was a couple things that were really intentional there. For part of it was my faith, and part of it was I just picked one thing. I said, okay, I'm going to start my day off right, and I'm going to implement a morning, I call it kickstart now. A lot of people call it a morning routine, but I'm going to get myself right in the morning. It's going to be prayer, it's going to be gratitude, it's going to be meditation, it's going to be exercise. I didn't just jump into this and start doing it perfectly, but mm-hmm. I started adding some of these things in. And what I found was that it made it very difficult for me to start making more tougher or or making decisions on things that wouldn't serve me if I was starting my day off right. If I knew I was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I was going to start putting myself in a position to win the day, then I wasn't staying out as late at night. I was getting better sleep. I wasn't doing things that were going to hurt me and that type of thing. So that was a big one for me. My faith was another big one. So when I say life coaching, and by the way, most of my leadership coaching and my sales coaching end up having a component of this because everyone's got some mess, right? We've all got something across, I call it the Forbes categories, and I probably didn't make that up. I don't know where I came from it, but family, occupation, recreation, body and health, education, and spirituality. We've all got some stuff we got to work through. So even my sales and my leadership coaching, we all get there. Sales coaching, I love that. I mean, I thought about navigating just straight to doing the leadership thing, but I do love sales, and I love working with salespeople and realtors, and even so I've got some people outside of the real estate industry that I work with. And so that is really pulling apart goal setting, and some people, I just want to focus on business, and we'll focus on business. Some people say, okay, I also have an exercise goal and a fitness goal, and I also have a personal development goal, so we'll include those things. But it's like pulling apart their sales process. What are you saying? How many contacts are you making? It's usually you find issues in a few different spots, right? It's either number of connections that you're making, and if it's not number of connections that you're making, it's what are you saying? And if you're making the connections and getting the appointments and you're not getting the deals, then it's what does your presentation look like and how are you interacting with people? So you start peel the layers back and try to figure out a solution to the problem. And I absolutely love that. And by the way, I lived that too. When I was selling real estate, I remember talking to somebody once. I was like almost bragging about how few listings I had. I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to take that one because it's overpriced. I'm not going to take that one because they're not willing to pay my fee. And the owner of the company overheard me once. He heard me say that, and he goes, hey, Kevin, let me ask you a question. How many appointments are you going on? I was like, well, I don't know, maybe 2 last month. I was like, well, there's always going to be someone not willing to pay your fee. There's always going to be someone not willing to price it right. But if you're only going on 2 a month, you're not going to find the ones that are. So it's pulling apart the process, figuring that out. And then the leadership part of it, I mean, that's all encompassing. I mean, you got to figure out, you mentioned influence and credibility, and then what you're really doing as a leader and as a salesperson, frankly, is you're building a level of trust. And you're just putting deposits into this trust account, and you're figuring out a way that you can establish good principles, values, what's important to the organization, what's important to your people, and then make good decisions on how you're going to live that out. Because if you don't live it out, then you're going to lose the credibility, and then you lose the locker room, as they say. And it's everything in between. It's mindset, confidence, it's habits, it's doing more of the right, doing less of the wrong. It's across the board.
Have you found? I know you have. You've had to, because I see. I think a lot of it, because one of the things I talk with the agents who've had success, they reach a point where, another John Maxwell phrase I use a lot of times, the lid. They reach a lid in their business, and they're going out on appointments. A lot of them just have a good sphere of influence, whatever it is. So they're getting a number of referrals. They're basically batting nearly 100% because they've been referred, and they have a great presentation. They're closing. They're getting the deal. Yep. But they're going along, and I mean, you can make a decent living closing. I think one person I had recently, they said they fell 5 to 7 million. They're pretty much at 9 million. In my opinion, they're maxed out, doing everything themselves with no transaction coordinators, no assistants, nothing. But they're really missing the front end piece. They're really good at all the back end piece, but they're just not getting some appointments where they are actually pushing the envelope and getting a few no's. They're 2 for 2 every month instead of being 7 for 10 or 6 for 10, type of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's an issue. We used to tell people, if you have a sales rate of 100%, you're probably not hitting. Your business isn't as big enough as big as it ought to be. So yeah. I agree 100%. Again, it's getting outside of the comfort zone, and then getting to the point you have to make a decision. Am I going to be a solopreneur and do this and add an assistant and add a transaction coordinator, or do I want to build a team? And then you start scaling your business from there, because yes, there's only so much you can do as a solopreneur.
So in your coaching, I imagine is this a common topic where they,
no question.
Yeah. To talk about some of the conversations, and you don't have to mention names or anything, but maybe some success stories or some things, just some challenges of some of the clients that you've had and that you help them break through this lid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a big challenge is, do I want to be a manager of other people? I think that's where a lot of it comes to a head. It's do I want to spend my time just building this business and take it to a certain level, and then it's at X, and I don't care to take it to Y because I don't feel like I want the hassle. One person I've been talking to is, we're having this exact conversation, and he's nearing retirement, and he, by the way, came up with a mentor in a situation designed exactly for this, in that the mentor was only going to work for 5 more years and wanted to continue to earn on the book going into retirement. And that's exactly the way this happened. And now this gentleman is getting to the point of where he's getting ready to retire and doesn't want to do that. And to me, that's a big miss. And I'm trying to help him work through. And he's a kind of a perfection personality. So he likes to have his
total control.
He likes to have the control. And he's kind of dabbled around with people in the past and hadn't really gone so well. So it's trying to help him kind of visualize what life might be into the retirement years, where he can nurture and train somebody up to then not have to be as engaged as he is right now, so he can go travel some more and do some of those types of things.
Right.
I mean, for someone that is interested, that really wants to build a team, working with them, it's easy, because it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, what are you trying to do? What are you the best at, and what do you love doing, and what do you want to do? What 1 or 2 or 3 things, maybe max, do you want to spend your time doing? And now we can organize the rest of it around you. And yes, you're gonna now have to allocate a period of time to people management, but this is what that looks like. And if you're gunning it, wanting to do that, then that's an easier conversation than helping someone, getting back to the psychology comment you made, trying to get out of their own way to be able to not. I mean, what's the alternative? You just walk away one day,
or you burn out.
You either burn out, or you walk away one day and you're not. And now all that work that you've done over a period of, in this case, 30 years, it's not. You're not going to monetize it, because not many people are just going to buy a book that hasn't been, that person hasn't been brought in and cultivated, because there's no guarantees as to what that's going to happen. So you need to start 5 years in advance. I tell people it's so hard for some 5 years in advance to start making those introductions and start creating that stickiness with them and your database, so that you can then dial it back a little bit. Financial services, they have this figured out. The financial advisors, they do this beautifully. It's, for some reason, it's been tougher in real estate to kind of get people to buy into that model.
How does the financial services do it?
Well,
because I agree with you.
First of all, financial services, they've got the residual thing worked out, right? So now I create a database, a book of business, and it's generating revenue. So I can bring people in to help work the book. A lot of the heavy lifting has already been done. So we figure out our splits. I'm still might be engaged, but I'm engaged at a very different level. And now I'm going to have the meetings. I'm going to do the new account creation, maybe just $1 million plus or 10 million, depending on the financial advisor. And I'm developing a team that is helping maintain these client relationships, but the engine is running, man, and those residuals are coming in. I was at a mastermind over at Landmark a couple weeks ago, and it was about teams, and that's a very broad term. I mean, there's people that have teams of agents. I think that's kind of like what every agent that enters the business, they see that because it's out there in front. But there's other agents in town who really just have a support staff. They're that point person. They're the ones going out and doing the face-to-face, the things that they love to do, and negotiate and that sort of thing. But a lot of their marketing, a lot of the paperwork that has to be done, all the computer work is all being done by other support people. Sure. And I think there's some sort of mix in between. Some people have just 2 or 3 agents working. Yep. There's other teams that have 20, 30 people, they're working, but that's very difficult. The large team, and people are turning and burning, coming in and out of that. You've got to have that ability the thick skin, I guess, you're constantly trying to hire in and obviously retain, but there's always someone spilling over.
and takes a little piece of your heart with them every time they roll out.
I like a managing broker.
Yeah.
Right? Same concept.
Yeah, exactly.
Hire, develop, and every once in a while someone breaks your heart.
In working with some of these people who have hit this lid, I think, like you said, they got to get out of their own way. That's this gentleman you were just talking about. I'm thinking, okay, so you'd rather say, I'm not doing any more business as of this date and make no more money, because those same people that you worked with for years that are still buying and selling houses, they're just going to call someone else and you're not going to get a piece of it.
Yeah. Well,
why would you do that?
It's exactly right. And it seems so simple, but at the same time, the work and the effort involved in that, it's easier. I mean, we have like what is it? The pain of discipline or the pain of regret, right? The discipline and the intention that it would take for him to do what I'm suggesting, and he'll do it. I mean, we're getting there. Right. But the pain and the discipline that the intention that it will take, in order for him to set this up over the next 5 years, is different than what he's been doing over the past 30. And so it's so easy to just get swept back up into the next deal. And I got this listing appointment, and I'm just going to push that off. And so it's cracking that code. No. And to your point on teams and individuals, that's all personal preference. I mean, I know people that are super successful as individuals. What I do like about teams is if you structure your team properly, then you can disengage. And I think strategic disengagement, there's a book years ago, he wrote The Corporate Athlete, Jim Lear, and I think Tony Schwartz also wrote a book called The Power of Full Engagement. And in it, he spends a lot of time talking about strategic disengagement, and I'm a big fan of that, and R&R and that type of thing. Now, there's a difference. Strategic disengagement means you're basically identifying periods of time when you're not going to be working, versus loafing, which is like I'm getting distracted and I'm going over here and messing around on my phone for a few hours. Very, very different. That's bad. Strategic disengagement is good. Right. And if you set your team up properly, or even a solopreneur that has someone that can really cover your business, I'm a big proponent of not being the 24-hour agent. I know that irritates people, especially the 24-hour agent. Doesn't like hearing that, but unless I've like I mentioned, there are two people that I've coached over the years that it's such an anomaly that they thrive 100% on the business. And when I tried to coach harmony into them, they eventually told me, look, back off. This is what we do. This is what we love. No kids, no pets. This is our life. Right. And when we're not doing it, we're not happy. It's like, okay, everyone's different, right? And so that's in my coaching practice, that's what it's just like when I went to work in Ponte Vedra. I ask a whole bunch of questions before I try to say anything. It's really trying to uncover someone and what they're trying to accomplish. And sometimes it's okay, you've told me a lot of things. I understand what your end goal is. I don't think you're making the calls that are going to get you there, and then we work through that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's, I could hire a team tomorrow and blow it up, but I just don't want to do that. I want to be the solo opener.
Do you find a lot of the clients, you help them open their eyes to what is out there in real estate? Because everyone does, every broker is different. Every agent does their business slightly different. That's the beautiful thing about it. You can be you, right? You can be authentic. Do, if you're a social media wonder, you can go do that and figure out a way to make your business work. But I think a lot of agents, we talk a lot of the top agents, expanding their horizons, whether they're doing how they structure their team, or do you have some investment property yourself? Do you understand how there's so many? Real estate is such a broad thing, but there's so many that are just focused on the single family home. Mm-hmm. They miss a lot of the opportunity, and I would assume a lot of them come to you and like, I've hit this lid, I don't know what to do. They don't realize there's 6 ways to Sunday to get you through that lid. Which one works for you? And a lot of them just didn't even know these opportunities were out there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is trying to help them open their minds to it. And I will say this, your comment, yes, there's a lot of different ways to build a tremendous real estate business. And you can be yourself, you can be authentic. And at the same time, it's hard work. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of it that you might need to get outside of your comfort zone a little bit. There are agents that over time, all their business comes from being on the tennis court or the golf course, or, I know people that work the bars and they go hang out at bars, and I don't necessarily recommend that, but that's what they do. There's a lot of different ways to build a real estate business, but that's not generally how it's built from the beginning. And I think the best agents that even when they do fall into those rhythms that, man, I get a bunch of business coming from my tennis group, is great, but it's always good. It's always a good idea to have multiple sources of income, other sources of clients, whether it's open houses or expireds or for sale by owners or social media or whatever, your other sources there. And then to your point, get into developing levels of income. What do you call it? Wake up money or money that's coming when you're not even working. And again, financial services has figured that out. In real estate, there's not a lot of, there's some models that have some residual type income from recruiting, but it's more of a purchasing and owning and either renting, short-term rentals, that type of thing. And understanding what market you're in and what your time horizon is on that. And if that makes sense for you as well to develop a larger portfolio. Sure.
So someone listening right now, I'm going back and asking different questions, but I always like to put the rubber to the road, so to speak. We'd like to say everyone needs your services, your coaching, your mentoring. I think everyone at different times. There's some great people that have always had a coach. They still have a coach. How many times they talk to every week, but let's get related. That person's out there. We just say everyone needs a coach. To me, they just kind of blow that off. They're like, well, all these other people don't have coaches and they're doing okay, so I'll just continue not having a coach. But what are give us some, I don't know if you want to call it, just some success stories, some people, where they were at in their business. Mentioned Angie Bell yesterday, who coaches well. She knew from corporate America going into real estate years ago, she hired a coach right away to advance her career. Give us some stories that hopefully will resonate with some of the listeners that might be listening. Maybe here's where you're at, and maybe you had obviously you've had a client who was there. They can relate to each other, and then how you turned, obviously, hopefully improve their business, or improve their life.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's quite a few.
Yeah.
And I think the main thing I would say is the conversation is different when you're mentoring someone that's trying to go from 0 to 5 million in volume, to 5 to 15 million in volume, to 15 to 20 to 50 to 60, and I've coached and mentored people in all of these realms. The conversation evolves. It's not the same set of skills. It's not the same questions to ask. It's not the same it's not the same habits. And probably the success story that comes to mind, let me pick on, was someone that was interviewed as a testimonial for me recently and credited some of my coaching from taking her from $6 million in volume to $14 million in volume. And that had to do with helping her identify that she wasn't properly working her sphere of influence properly. And she knew a whole lot of people, and just with some little tiny tweaks, it wasn't anything major that I did, but just having her recognize that and then getting a little bit more intentional and spending more time there cultivating that, and then maybe asking some more pointed questions about, hey, what are your plans with your real estate? Or, hey, tell me a little bit about, what's happening in your life, and then following up later about some of those little questions ended up having a major influence on her business. And so it's just trying to, and not everybody wants to do that, by the way. Some people, have different levels of success that they aim to achieve. And I've worked with some people that say, I'm doing $10 million a year right now. My goal is to maintain that level of success, but I want to dial it back a little bit on how many hours I spend doing this, and can you help me get there? So it's everything in between. It's just helping them figure out, okay, what am I going to do in order to get where I want to go? What am I going to do more of, and what am I going to do less of? What am I going to delegate? What am I going to stop doing? And Would you agree a lot? I would imagine a good portion of your clients have gone through a frustration level for a period of time before they make the jump to say, you know what, someone's been telling me for the last year I should get a coach. All right, I'll try a coach, versus being proactive, knowing that, hey, I'm going to be successful, and I know when I reach this level, I'm not going to be able to do it all on my own. What's going to be my, being out in front of it? I mean, what kind of, do you find a lot probably have frustrated for a couple of years where they could have doubled their production? I imagine this lady probably was over a year or two that she doubled her production because she was working on it.
if she had started that earlier, she would have just ramped right up, right? In theory. Yeah.
I think it's 50-50. If I were to look at my practice, I've got some people that are just gung-ho and I know I need a coach and I want you to be that person. And then some of them, to your point, my business is tanked and now I'd like someone to help me recover it. And so there's been a pain point there. I think it's about half and half.
Yeah.
And I think would you prefer everyone to be proactive? Yes, but if I look at my situation and my history, I had to hit rock bottom. And again, it's not something I'm proud of, but it was just part of my story. And then when I look back on my entire career, it's like, geez, as long as you're taking some lessons from it and figuring it out and applying it as you move forward, then it's okay. And we just got to give ourselves a little bit of grace about when we made the decision. If we could have made it more proactively, that may have been better, but maybe I needed to go through that in order to be the person I am today. And so it's just a different scenario for everybody.
So let's just kind of quickly tip through some of the buckets that you talked about there. Are you working with any agents that are in maybe that 0 to 2 years, having renewed, done their first renewal? What are some of the challenges that they're having, and what are some of the things you're helping them work through?
0 to 2, generally speaking, it's a level of perfection personality. Even if they're not a perfection personality, it's I want to know everything before I do anything. And it's just not the way it works. And I'd love to say that we're going to be absolute masters of our craft before we go out and get front and face to face with buyers and sellers, and it's just not the case.
Yeah.
And so it's trying to help them get out of the way, and this was a big deal for me too, because when I was leaving Merrill Lynch, I was there for a while. I was kind of a go-to person for some things. When I got into real estate, man, I was the same thing. I wanted to know everything before I did anything. And that's why I went to all the classes. And that's why I learned so much stuff. and guess what? I made no money. And then at my first closing, I remember sitting there thinking, oh, I'm feeling kind of good about myself. I'm maybe a little cocky. And all of a sudden I feel all the heads turned towards me, and the attorney was asking me where the escrow check was. And I was like, well, back in the day, we had to request an escrow check in advance, take it to closing, and I'd forgotten to do that. Did I learn that in class? Heck yes, I did. When did I really learn the lesson? When I was sitting at that table and I was embarrassed and I was sweating, and it never happened again. But that's where my point is, that's where the lessons are learned, is on the field. It's when someone asks you a question you don't know the answer to. Well, maybe you heard a bunch of different ways to handle that in class, but now that I'm face to face with somebody and it's going on. So it's helping someone understand that you're not going to be ready to do your first open house, but you got to go do your first open house. You can go watch somebody once or twice, maybe have a conversation, but don't overdo it with that. Get out there and do it, screw up, fall on your face, say something wrong. Don't worry about saying you don't know, because I'd rather you say that than try to make something up.
Yeah.
And just let's build the muscle, and then understand that we're working through fears, man. We're working through fear of failure. We're working through fear of change. We're working through fear of being judged. And all those things are coming up for the 0 to 2 agent. And so it's action to get the confidence, and it's also study the market. Have a good answer to how's the market. If someone asks you how's the market and you're saying, well, it's a little slow, or it's fantastic, or it's great, or whatever, that's not telling anybody anything. You really need to dive deep and have something where you can have a reasonable conversation that's going to give them something of value.
Give us an example of that. Yeah, that's because I can guarantee everyone listening does exactly that. In passing, someone asking that question, how's the market, because they just want to kind of break the ice of a conversation. How do you take it?
Some are better than others.
Yeah.
And so what I encourage people to do is every month spend an hour and study the market. And I think there's some tools out there that you can do it with now. I know you can do it through the NEFAR statistics page. And if you're doing 90% of your business in Sawgrass Country Club, then really know that market. Someone says to me, "Hey Kevin, how's the market?" I'm saying, "Well, what market are you interested in? Which portion of the market? I mean, what do you mean?" "Well, there's a condominium market, there's a residential market. Are you interested in your community?" So I'm going to ask first a follow-up question before I dive into my talking points. And they may say, no, just the general market. Say, okay, well, it's interesting right now. There's opportunities out there you wouldn't believe. Right now, the inventory supply of homes is 6 months. And geez, just a few years ago, it was 2 months, and that was really, really hot. So we're starting to see things come back into balance a little bit more. Yeah. Rates are a little bit high. You see where I'm going. I don't need to go through the whole thing, but now I'm giving them something that's of value, that's also setting me apart as someone that that's an expert, and I've answered the question that so many agents get wrong. And I mean, I've heard, and by the way, I love some of the old school books on real estate, but one book, I won't even name the name, but they used to say, well, just say that the real estate market is exciting because that's always true. And I was like, that's not telling anybody.
Right.
And I get it, but that's not telling anybody anything. So ask a clarifying question. Now, if they say, well, tell me a little bit about the condo market in Sawgrass Country Club, and I don't know the answer, say, I got something, I'll send you on that. And then you have a reason to follow up and give them.
Because they're asked to something very specific, and then you become a resource.
You become a resource. You follow, now I have a reason to follow up with you.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to follow up with you anyway if you're asking that question. It's the number one most often asked question to real estate agents. And it's just we missed the boat. And another, I'll give you the number 2, by the way, even though you didn't ask. Why do you sell real estate? I mean, that's a really, really important question to answer. Even if you don't get asked as often, it's a super important question if a buyer or seller ever asks you. In fact, I encourage realtors to tell them anyway as part of the connection process. Let me tell you a little bit about why I do this. And we're going to dive into that question a little bit more at the Landmark event too, and really get into the sales process that I've developed over the years and where to fit that in, because things are changing in real estate. And this isn't, I'm not a clickbait guy. I'm not a hot take guy. There's some in my industry that are saying that, this is almost business as usual. That's wrong. It's not business as usual. And there's some are saying that this is an existential threat. That's wrong too. It's just, I got to recognize what's happening and then figure out my strategy that's going to carry me forward over the next 5, 6, 7 years. But that was a long answer. 0 to 2. Get the habits going, take the action, build. So when I say study the market, that builds confidence. That's the biggest separator, I think, between someone that's going to have a mediocre, average, or not a career in real estate to someone that really gets it and gets it going is confidence. And if I'm studying the market, just like an actor who has stage fright, if I know my lines better, then when I'm sitting in front of a buyer or seller, then you almost start to carry yourself a little bit differently. Then you start to carry yourself when you're prospecting differently. I used to tell people, when you get that first when you get that first listing, when you get that first buyer, when you get that first closing, a lot of times people in the 0 to 2, then they put all their energy and effort over here, and they want to shepherd that through and nurture that baby, like Tommy Boy with his precious little pet before he crushes his pet. If you don't know Tommy Boy, you got to see that movie. And they spend all their time here. And my advice is, spend some time there. But there's no better time for you. My company is called Momentors. You have momentum now to start making those other prospecting calls, and you got to keep that thing going, because if you spend all your time watching this one close, then guess what? Now I got to start it all over again. Right. And guess what? Realtors are good at this. We have the up and down roller coaster of income, and that's not where you want to be. You want to be on this trajectory with little ups and downs along the way. It's not perfect, but you don't want to be on this, man. I've been on this, and it's not a fun roller coaster.
When you start with somebody, do you generally, or in your conversation, hey, you ask them to make a commitment for, this should be a 12-month, because obviously you're not going to make changes. Something may change in 30 days, maybe, because you come up with some brilliant, but typical coaching takes time.
Yep.
And obviously, like I said, depending on how often you're meeting and you're asking these questions and digging into their business, it could be, a couple months before you actually have some sort of like, okay, I've been listening to you for the last 6 weeks. This is some ideas I have, or whatever, however you approach that. Do you have an end game in mind? In other words, saying, hey, you need to make a commitment for 6 months, or this needs to be a commitment for 12 months based on what you're telling me you want to get out of my coaching.
So yes, the end game in mind is what they tell me the end game in mind is. And so my contracts are for 12 months. I do have a 6-month option. It just costs more on a monthly basis. If someone's making a lower commitment, then it's just going to be a little bit more expensive. But the end game is they tell me 3 professional goals, and then they tell me 3 personal goals. And then we talk it through, and they say, well, look, I want you to focus in on my professional goals with me. I'm going to work on the personal stuff, but I still get it because I want to ask about it. And then our goal is to get them working at the level that is going to be consistent with getting them at whatever number they want to get to. Getting them whatever hurdles or challenges we need to clear through, whether it's a habit thing or a mindset thing or a mission thing, whatever it is, we'll find it. And then we start to work through it. So some clients I have, they look, I just want, you have real estate experience. I know you've been down this path. I just want you to tell me what I need to do. What did you do? What are some things I can do? And give me some characteristics of what a great open house looks like, or what a great expired call looks like. Let's just talk.
Some more direct.
And that's more of what I would call a training relationship. It's still coaching because there's an accountability piece, but it's more direct. And then some people come to me, it's like, I don't know what's wrong. And here's what I hear so often. I know what I need to be doing, but I'm not doing it. Right. I call that the momentum.
Well, that was my question. What do you say to those people that say, I don't need a coach because they're just going to tell me what I already know?
Well, I know what if they know what to do and are doing it, then the question becomes, are they achieving it at that level? Are they approaching burnout? Is there something I can help them to get more harmony in life? If they know what to do and they're doing it and they're checking all their boxes across all those Forbes categories that I mentioned, then maybe they don't need a coach. Right. But there's so few people that are actually operating at that level. Right. A lot of the times it's, I know what I need to do. I hear this so often. I'm just not doing it, and they hire me to try to bridge that gap. Okay, so what is that? We do a lot of work with tying people back to their why, their mission. We try to figure out what the block is, and a lot of times it's usually a couple things. It may be fear, and sometimes we have to pull back fear and really dive into that and understand what is the source of fear and what's the worst that can happen. And here, let me share some stories about how I overcame some fears. Sometimes it's time and energy management. Sometimes they're just not prioritizing their stuff right. And then another one is just a big one, is distraction. I mean, we are addicted to distraction. I think Robin Sharma said that. We are addicted to distraction. We have a love affair with our devices and social media. I mean,
the dopamine hit.
The statistics, the statistics that I've read are I mean, 2.5 hours a day on social media. 2.5 hours a day. Now, some of us use it for business, so we need to be there, but 2.5 hours a day is an awful lot, even for someone that's doing part of their business there. I mean, that's a month out of the year. Yeah. That we're and it's not necessarily going there to do business and to, maybe comment on some things, but it's scrolling through and down this endless rabbit hole of looking at stuff. So it's trying to identify, what do we need to do less of in order that we can build more things in here that are going to move you towards what you're.
Well, I think a lot of people. I knew I saw this ad. John Maxwell, Influence Credibility. I'm like, yeah, that's what a podcast can do for me. I didn't know how to go though from where I was at, point A, to B, having a full-fledged podcast, which has taken time, and I've gotten better and better, every episode's, whatever. But I hired a coach. Sure. Who, that's what he was doing. He, now he has close to 1,000 episodes on his program, but he coaches other people to make the connections. And sometimes you need to get someone who has connections to help you with your connections, because it's like, hey, I'm here. I want to double my production or whatever it is. I want to get my production to a certain level, but I don't know, what does it actually take to do that? Well, you need to farm a neighbor, whatever it is, those tips. And sometimes we don't know those first couple of steps. And that's why we never take the step, because we don't actually know what the first step is, because we're looking at the 10th step, which is where we want to be. That's right. And we need a coach to help us get those first few steps going.
Very well said. And we may be just a sense of overwhelm. And this is where I want to go, and I don't know how to get there. And so how do we chunk this down so we can
push them out of the nest?
That's right. And that's part of it. Part of it is chunking it down and execute, but part of it is, okay, you may not feel like you're ready. Go do it and tell me how it went. Right. We'll do an autopsy afterwards. And by the way, you're going to be better for it, even if it doesn't go the way you wanted it to go. Because we were talking. I couldn't remember the name of the book, but we were talking about John Maxwell stuff before the show. And sometimes you win, sometimes you learn is the title of one of his books. And that's a fantastic book for trying to get out of our way with the fear of being judged or fear of failure. Because for those of us that are on the field making plays, you pay too much attention to what people are saying about it or whatnot. Well, what does it matter? I mean, you're on the field making plays, and the plays don't always go the way you want them to. But you get up, you dust yourself off, and you go make another play, and you maybe do it a little differently next time.
Yep, 100%. Kevin, anything you want to add?
Well, congratulations. You've done this for a while and over 200 shows, and that's amazing. And so I really appreciate you having me on here and what you're doing for the real estate community. And,
I appreciate that.
And, I can be found at momentorsllc.com. I got a lot of resources there. Even if someone isn't looking to engage a coach, I have a blog there. I write a ton of content, and there's some other resources there for realtors.
You have a great LinkedIn. Yeah, momentorsllc.com. Obviously, will be in the show notes if you're listening to the audio version. It'll be in there if you want. You can't find them, but you just go Kevin Waugaman on LinkedIn. You're right there.
There aren't too many. There actually is one more Kevin Waugaman who has a criminal record somewhere. So that's not me. So if it doesn't look like me, then
oh, that wasn't the tough times you were having in your 20s?
I'm not saying I don't have anything on there, but there's someone that a little bit more than me.
I appreciate you, and this was a great show, and we could talk for hours, but the 19th of July,
That's
this
right.
is 2024, because we know this stuff will be out there forever. You'll be at Landmark and talk more about some of the value you can bring to the agents and helping them out.
Thank you. July 19th, and looking forward to seeing everybody there. And Tom Reber with Planet Home is going to be there, and my friend Dan Stewart with Gray Frog Media be there as well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.